Hello.
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 How's it going?
Hello. Welcome, Phil. Welcome, Nick, to our
Hello.
Alien
Nick.
3 dissection.
Yes, I've got the bone saw ready to go.
Right. Fantastic. I'm prepped. I'm ready, as you can see.
I've
Right
washed
over
my
here.
hand.
As you should. You do not want to risk any contamination.
Absolutely not. Not with cholera running around.
Yeah. Wouldn't
Wait,
be
is it
good
really
on
running
the...
around?
No.
I'm kidding.
Wouldn't be good on the
I didn't
report,
believe
would it?
you. So yeah, no, welcome, guys. I'm really really chuffed to have you both here to chat about Alien 3. So
Yeah. I'm excited.
fun fact, I think. I don't remember the last time I saw Alien 3. I owned the box set. I've seen them all, but Alien 3 is just completely blocked out of my mind. So when I rewatched it, it was like watching it for the first time. I couldn't remember a lick of anything. So that's just sort of kind of bit of a caveat to kind of set the scene in terms of my experience rewatching this movie. It really
Right.
was like watching it cold. But
Interesting.
before we get into that, I think we should do a brief introduction as to kind of
Absolutely.
who we are. If you're new, my name is Luke Deckard. This is the Luke Deckard Show. I'm a writer, author, and I write for podcasts. Phil, who are
Yes,
you?
and well, thank you, Luke. Well, I'm Phil. I am the co-host here on the Luke Deckard Show. I'm an artist, but I've done a lot. I've done a lot of film in the past, and I've done a lot of storyboard art and concept art and stuff like that. So there's a lot of freelancing going on as far as I'm concerned. So I'm overall, I think, as far as this podcast is concerned, I'm very interested in film. I think that probably is a good thing to say.
And Nick, who the hell are you?
That's a good question, a fair question. I'm an author and lately a podcaster, and clearly an Alien 3 apologist.
Yes. You're a crime author.
A crime author, yeah, right. I should have said that, yeah.
Yes. And remind me the name of your first book.
Blue Light Yokohama.
Blue Night Yokohama. Yes. Highly
Nice.
recommended. Also, you have a really good podcast out at the moment called Faceless.
Yes, thank you for doing the plugs for me there, Luke. Which I didn't think
Faceless.
Yes, I do have a podcast called Faceless, which is non-fiction, and it's about a family in Tokyo who are all murdered by a man who then sleeps in their house and eats their ice cream, and is still on the run. So mystery ensues.
Yes.
Oh man.
I highly recommend listening. I've been
Whoa.
really enjoying listening to
Thanks,
to
man.
this
And thanks for having me on. It's lovely to be here.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
So, Alien. I love the Alien movies. I love the
Me
Alien
too.
franchise. But it goes off the rails.
But okay, go on.
It goes off the rails quite a bit. But it is a franchise that I absolutely love. I think the first two films are incredible. They are so sharp, so vivid, and they stick with you so well. I think far more than I think some of the sequels do. They have some of the best characters, some of the best dialogue. Like on a regular basis, I will say, "Game over, man! Game over! Game over!"
Right,
Like,
yeah.
It is just always in the back of my mind for some reason. It's just that stuff just sticks with you. So I'm a big fan of these. I guess before we dive into Alien 3, tell me about your experiences with the Alien movies.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna say Alien has been a cultural kind of touchstone throughout when I was growing up as a kid. I've not watched the films until I became a man, until around when I was 15, where I finally gathered the courage to watch it, because I remember back in the day, in 2000, 2001, I was like 11 and 12, I would go through like IMDb. That existed back then. I'm pretty sure it did. If it didn't, then 2002,
Sure.
3, 4, somewhere around there. And I would read reviews of different movies, as one does when you're a kid and you're kind of like curious about watching other films. And I remember that Alien was a huge, like, the imagery was something that I was always kind of drawn towards, but I was very scared to approach because all the reviews that I read were like, so like Alien is one of the scariest movies ever made. It's so, it's one of the most terrifying things. And I remember one person, I'll never forget this one review. I still remember when I was like a lot younger than I am now, where he said, Exorcist, that was nothing, but Alien, that scared the hell out of me. So I was terrified to start watching the movie. So I rented it. I gathered the courage, rented it at the DVD rental store, and
What are those?
I know, right? The ancient art of renting DVDs, and I actually skipped through the entire movie just so I can see if there's anything scary. So I was just like, okay. I gotta brace myself. There's probably gonna be some scary, and I couldn't find anything necessarily. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because that's not what the movie's about, is it? It's terror. It's not, it's not like gore and imagery that's supposed to scare you. And then I kind of watched the first film.
I mean,
kind of like by
there's some
bits.
imagery in Alien that is
Oh no, there is.
pretty terrifying.
There is. But the funniest thing was that I started watching it that way, and I really started just loving the visuals, just being entranced by the look of the thing. And then I actually watched it all the way through, and I just loved it. And then I went on to Aliens, and then Alien 3, and then Alien Resurrection. I think that was it for that, like 2004. Yeah, that's all there was.
Yeah.
That's all there was.
Yeah,
And then I was just fascinated with it. I watched all the different cuts too. So I watched the theatricals and the extended directors and assembly cuts too.
For me, it was like a child. I mean, it was a VHS, and I watched. I think it was Aliens, way too young. And when back then, my mum kind of looked quite. Well, you won't tell by looking at me, but she looked quite kind of similar-ish to Sigourney Weaver. So that was scary because it was like if your mum was in a horror movie. But then I think it was just kind of like what really scared me about it was that the clear impression that the alien didn't really care about you. It wasn't personal, man. It was just the kind of, it was just doing its own thing, and then it would get hungry and it would go for you. And I think compared to a lot of horror movies where it's all about like malevolence and and there's this external force coming for you, this was just like the thing is hungry, and it will not stop until it's eaten. And there was something about that as a kid where I was kind of delighted by it and really excited by it, but at the same time, like you say, I could only watch like small chunks, and then you have to hit pause and come back. And I think also because there's a kid in Aliens as well, I also weirdly think it was the extended cut, because I do remember the guy from Red Dwarf being in this, when they show you the Hadley's Hope, the kind of the colony working with all the people running around and kids and people having coffee. And I remember that being particularly scary because you sit like with Alien 1, you sit with the humans first. You meet them, you like them before the stuff starts happening to them. And I think because the horror is consumed by humans first versus just like, they're just numbers on a page, right? I think it was really effective for me, not just as a kid, but throughout my life.
I agree. No, they're terrific. So, Aliens seems to be. What do you mean? Well, I was kind of said my piece about Alien, but yeah, I mean, I as a kid, I grew up watching all this stuff. I was never afraid of it. I loved it. I watched it as a kid. I remember, all of my, childhood friends, like we would play with Predator action figures and Alien action figures, and the films would be on, TV all the time, so we would watch it on television and stuff like that. Or someone would have the VHS, and therefore we would also maybe watch it that way. But no, it was always sort of ingrained in my pop culture growing up. Alien was just always around, and I loved it. I never found these things scary per se, but I found them intriguing. So yeah, so I always loved it. Yeah, that's kind of my experience with it. It's always kind of been there,
Makes sense.
and I don't think I really started to fully appreciate it though until probably my late teens when I went back and did kind of more of a serious watch of them, serious watch, where I was like, I could digest it a little bit more and understand it outside of just it being alien movie action figure-y kind of stuff. When you could really get into the characters and the story and what real horror means, what a real horror movie can look like and what that means for these characters. And I remember, I think that I remember being really excited when Alien versus Predator came out.
Me too. Me too. I was so excited. Like my film school that I was going to at the time in 2004, they were like, "So we have some free tickets to Alien versus Predator," and I'm like, "Yes!" I was like, before he even asked, because I saw he had like 20th Century Fox like tickets, and it said 20, and I was like, Alien versus Predator, Alien versus Predator, Alien versus Predator. It's like Alien versus Predator, and I'm like, yes! So we got to watch like a critic screening of it.
Yeah, like I love the idea of it because I grew up with the video game
Me too.
RoboCop
Yeah.
versus Terminator. Like, everyone wanted these sort of epic showdowns, and of course every time we get them, they suck. I'm just it's so sad. But I was so excited because that would be the first time I'd be able to see one of these films in the cinema, right? And,
Yeah.
that was a disappointment.
Yeah.
But
Dude.
So let's chat Alien 3. Let's chat Alien 3.
I'm ready.
So,
Let's do it.
Nick, you kind of laid out the formula a minute ago of how the structure of these movies work, and that is you have this nice introduction where you learn a little bit about the crew, the characters, wherever you're kind of planted, and it's they're usually quite rich, and I mean there's the opening scene. This is a lot of people say this, but the opening scene of Alien, when the crew get out of the pods and they're all having their first meal together, is one of the best moments of just characterization and dialogue. It's just the way that it's written and acted it sparkles. It's amazing. I think you get the same kind of stuff in Aliens as well. Alien 3 is a little bit different, but it follows the same pattern of dropped in with a certain group of people, and there's a little bit of getting to know who they are before the mayhem kind of sets in. What is your initial thoughts on the opening of Alien 3? I mean like the title credits.
Oh yeah. Well, I think basically any point we discuss, you have to kind of contextualize it first by saying that there are two Alien 3 movies. There's one made by David Fincher, more or less, right? More or less, because he never makes a director's cut or a director's commentary because he washes his hands. He's treated so badly by the studio. He's famous for saying nobody hates Alien 3 more than me. Right.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of there's the assembly cut, which is the closest thing to David Fincher's movie, which I think is like 2.5+ hours, and then there is the theatrical cut, which is what most people probably will have seen.
Yes.
Now, in the theatrical cut, there won't be many examples of me defending it. Right. I mean, I don't think it's as bad as you see like on Rotten Tomatoes, where you've got stuff where like, it's got a worse rating than Hardcore Henry or Transformers or whatever, right? Yeah. I don't think it's a 45% out of 100 movie necessarily, but it is a mess, and the opening is I think integral to the mess for a bunch of reasons. Number one, for those who haven't seen it, I mean, you basically in the credits scene, you're seeing a facehugger basically create a fire and presumably infecting or laying its egg in one of the three characters who are on board, which is going to be Ripley, Hicks, or New. Now the problem is then the movie then goes on to become kind of a detective story where Ripley has to work out, was somebody infected? Did it lay an egg on someone? And the problem is we know that it did, right?
Yep.
And 2 out of those 3 people are dead from the get-go. So it's a detective story where we kind of already know the outcome. So you lose all the tension from the get-go.
Yes.
So the opening in the theatrical cut, I'm not a big fan of. The assembly cut, which is closer to what sort of David Fincher wanted to do, actually sits with a lot of the prisoners, and you kind of see, what it is for them on a Monday morning, and you kind of see more of their world, and you breathe with them as characters. So the David Fincher's version, I actually quite like, despite there being obvious problems. The theatrical cut is crap.
Yes. Yeah. No. I remember watching that because, like I said,
You watched both, didn't you?
I did watch both. And you get both in both cuts. You get the same splices of the facehugger doing, the implanting. I don't like it on either one. I think as you're saying, it does. It sort of gives away what's going to happen. It's like, well, if the only person who's alive is Ripley, I wonder,
Right.
and they try and do this. They try and do a fake out because there's 2 facehuggers,
Right.
which is also quite frustrating. Because you're sort of like, well, I feel like you would see one of the others. They're kind of, especially in the theatrical cut when they're examining the ship and stuff like that. It's like,
Right.
It doesn't make sense. Like, okay, in the theatrical cut, it goes into the dog, and there we go. And then in the assembly cut, it goes into a cow. But both times, I'm sort of thinking, how did no one see this?
Right.
How did this facehugger implant into a dog or a cow that people are aware of and are looking at, and no one see it happen? How quick,
Right.
We've seen the first Alien movies. It takes ages. It just sits there for ages. But I agree that I appreciated the assembly cut beginning where we found Ripley on the beach, because it does get her far away from the ship and from that drama, and it's sort of if you didn't have that introduction, that what was happening over the trailer of the adverts, not the adverts,
the adverts.
I don't know what the word is completely gone out of my mind. The titles. If you didn't have the spliced bit of the facehugger in that, and you just have the ship crash and you just get her on the beach, then you're right. Then you have an interesting detective story of her trying to find out what's going on. Why did the ship crash? Then maybe she finds out something caused a crash. What caused a crash? Then maybe she could find some footage.
Oh yeah.
You could have done something cool with that idea.
Oh, absolutely. Like structurally, when you guys are talking about that makes so much sense. But I'm gonna say right now that the main titles for me is like one of the coolest things ever, because I love the use of the music, the editing, the cuts between these close-ups with like a stark sound effect, like when one of their like cryosleep windows kind of cracks and that sort of thing. And I wanted to save this for later, but I have to say it now. Elliot Goldenfeld's music is like
incredible,
so good. I love it.
One of my highlight points here is just his name in capital letters.
Totally.
Yeah. So my question for you, Phil, is do you think that opening is good storytelling?
See, but that's a good question, because like you, Phil, the way that looks, the way that feels, the way that sounds, I love it. What it does to the story is I think it sucks a lot of momentum out, especially if we're talking about the theatrical cut. I went back and I counted today, and I think between Ripley first becoming They do the autopsy. It turns out that she thinks, okay, there's no egg, right, in either Hicks or Newt. From there to her becoming suspicious, to feeling a bit sick, to then finding out from Bishop, right, that it was with us all the way. It's about like 14 minutes. Yeah. So if what we're saying is the mystery is driving that, it ends up kind of just being like a bit. And I think if the opening is telling us hey, the key point to this story is the facehugger, and then kind of within the first half an hour, that's just done. I don't know. It just feels like it felt crammed in to have it in the credits story-wise. Although the way that they did do it, I agree, is beautiful.
Dude, with the close up of the facehugger like this, so like that's what I'm saying the praises of. But at the same time, you're all right, because it just takes away so much of any kind of like in the overall story, any kind of mystery or engagement that we would probably have if we didn't know exactly what happened.
Right, for sure.
And I think go on. Sorry. Oh, okay.
No,
well,
I was just gonna say, I think that I mean, I don't know, Luke, if one of the questions is going to be about the actual production and the kind of the fiasco that becomes the production of the movie. But I think it is, you can clearly see where certain shots have just been like, that was faxed in from LA late one night. Hey, we need to make sense of this. And so then David Fincher has to, who by the way is 29 years of age making this movie, has to then go back and kind of justify the facts and shoot a scene. And you can kind of see the ones that are there in his brain from the get-go versus the ones where it's like, that doesn't even make sense now, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's his first feature too, isn't it?
Yeah, and he doesn't make another movie for 4 years, which is 7. He just doesn't make a movie for 4 years because it was that bad.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. It would. Yeah. So moving on with this. So the next stage is obviously these. We start meeting the characters. We get an idea of where we are, and Ripley has crash landed on a prison colony planet, right? Mm-hmm. And it fits the motif. All of these films are some sort of locked room, horror show. And a prison, it's an interesting setting. It's on some levels, it's not too different from Aliens, but it is, there is an interesting added danger to this particular setting, particularly to Ripley, given that you're on this. It's in a prison. It's a male prison. There is a threat of potentially, potential sexual violence that could be harmful to her. So it does add this idea of a layer of tension, right? That you don't have in the previous films, because in the previous films you're all pretty much on the same team. There's no violent threat of that nature. So I did enjoy that aspect, but unlike Alien and Aliens, I feel the introduction in both the theatrical and the assembly cuts, those prisoner characters, they all kind of fall flat for me, except for I think it's Dylan. I think Dylan is the only one who feels like a real person. Everyone else just feels like they are just playing a role, and they've just read the summary of what this character is supposed to be. The outside of Clemens and Dylan and Paul McGann, everyone else is just angry prisoner. Right. And I found that quite disappointing, because I'm again, the first two films, like, there's so many cool, rich characters in those. And
I think you can like
that just seems completely sucked out of this third film.
Pretty long too, but it's like you can definitely remember every one of the characters, the Marines in Aliens.
Yeah.
Right.
Them all by their different. Not only that, but they have so much things to do story-wise with each other as much as within what is happening in the events of Aliens. Whereas these boys that we have here, it does tend to be like there's that one guy with the tattoo with the little droplet. He can be interchanged with the other guy that has the bandages on him, because they're not really doing much other than being just existing to.
They're just like alien fodder, basically. A lot of these guys, and I think the fact that they you know, I mean, I really like the character of Andrews as well, like basically the prison warden,
Yes.
who's
Oh
played
yeah.
by Brian Glover, who's this like ex-English wrestler, you know, and he's got this like bouncy ball in his hand.
Yeah.
But I think that the warden Andrews basically does a lot of the characterization for them versus
Yeah.
kind of seeing them do stuff. So he says to her repeatedly, like 3 or 4 times, "This is a very dangerous place, right? Please don't leave the infirmary."
Yes.
And just by the 3rd or 4th time, you think, well, I mean, there is a time where there's a scene where prisoners do try and rape Ripley, and so it's not like he's saying something that we never then see come to pass. But like he says it 3 or 4 times, and it would have been nice for some of that to come out through their own actions, through their own mouths. You know, yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think part of you. So there's a guy called Vincent Ward who is given the job as director initially. I think he's from New Zealand, and he comes up with the idea of a wooden planet, and the wooden planet is going to be populated by these kind of monastic monks who have this millenarian, religion, and that they all are very devout. And so the presence of a woman suddenly showing up kind of puts the cat amongst the pigeons. So you can see why Vincent Ward gets a credit in the story in this movie, because a lot of those elements are still there, right? It's just it's put into a prison, and it's quite easy to make the prisoners just follow the same kind of religion or whatever. So you can kind of see how they're trying to make it a kind of biblical movie, basically about faith. That's what this movie is about. But like you say, what you lose is a lot of sympathy with these characters. I mean, Aliens. Number one, we cleverly signpost a lot of those Marines. You see their names on the camera feed. You're constantly the opponent is barking out names, and so you form these associations. Here, you've got Andrews saying they're all murderers and rapists and child molesters. You don't get a lot of names unless you like read the screenplay. So I think there are definitely missed opportunities there, especially because look at that cast. Some of those Pete Postlethwaite gets like one scene for 5 seconds. He's an incredible actor, but he's just in it for like one scene. What are you doing? Paul McGann, who's just cut. I mean, that's one of my main problems. Hopefully we'll come to later. But the character of Golic, who is so integral to this story, if you watch the assembly cut, he, in a nutshell, so that somebody is killed in front of him, and he gets sprayed with blood, almost like baptized with this blood, and he's so in awe of the alien that he becomes obsessed with what he calls the dragon, and then plot happens. In the theatrical version, all of that just gone. You stop seeing him after a while. What a good actor! What a good character! Gone. So hard agree with you guys there, sadly.
Yeah, that was really. I was very disappointed with Paul McGann, especially in the theatrical cut, because I love him as an actor. I think he's terrific. He also narrates a number of shows for Noiser, and which podcast company which I work for. And I mean, he really is a great actor, and he was so underused in the first version. But then in the assembly cut, the thing is, my problem with the assembly cut is there are a lot of good ideas, but they don't really go beyond the idea.
They don't follow through. None of it follows through.
Like, I like the idea of him. He's seen the alien. He's, as you say, baptized in blood and his friend's blood, and then he wants to go and almost kind of worships this thing, right? And he calls, I like this as an idea, but even in the assembly cut, I think there's still not enough of him as a character to like really get behind it, other than just the surface level. Which I think is just the general problem, I think, with both versions of these films, just kind of across the board, is that even in the assembly cut, where things are maybe fleshed out a tiny bit more, maybe there's a little bit more character to certain people, it is still, unfortunately for me, there's still too much surface, right? But before we go to more of that, my question: do you find it? What were your thoughts on the fact that this film just wipes out Newt and Hicks and Bishop?
It's a tragedy. Like, this is the first time where I finally watched this movie recently. I haven't seen this film in maybe 10 years, probably. but this is the first time I've ever seen it, and I was imagining how would I feel being a fan of, like, I loved Alien, I loved Aliens. I'm here for 3. I heard a lot of great things about it. I'm in the cinema. Let's see this. Let's see this unfold. They did. That was, kind of heartbreaking, and also it made, if I had that kind of experience, I would probably be just kind of betrayed by the film at the beginning.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I would probably think, okay, let's see what they're promising with their absence. What are we going to see? What's going to be better? What's going to, like, if they're dead, there has to be a good reason that they're dead. What is this going to mean to Ripley? What is this going to mean to, the end of the story? And none of that happens. It's just, the only thing that it does do effectively is just make it so much more depressing.
Mm.
You want to go, Luke, or shall I?
No, it's you, man.
So I think I think partly this explains that super low rating. Like Terminator Dark Fate has a higher rating than this movie, right?
Ooh.
There are lots of weird bad movies.
We should not interrupt, but we should caveat that Rotten Tomatoes today is a very, very, very different website than what it was a few years ago.
Oh no, totally, and it's not like the be all and end all, but I think even just like as a
gauge,
a gauge. I do think what you say is very true, which I think a lot of people feel, but basically they took away the happy ending, right? If you look at even what Newt says at the end of Aliens 2, where she says, "Can I dream now?" and Sigourney Weaver as a mother says, "Yeah, it's safe to dream." Alien 3 shits all over that and says, no, this is a nightmare. Life is a nightmare. It's not a happy dream, right?
Yeah.
So 100%, I think it is depressing. I mean, I think, look, I have a hard disagreement with the idea that because it's depressing, it's bad, because, Alien and Aliens are not Little House on the Prairie. So
that'd be a good movie.
That would be, let's have that. Let's have that mashup.
Alien versus Little House on the Prairie.
Versus Little House on the Prairie, yeah. Here's what I think it does, because I think you hit upon a really important point. What does it do to the story? I think it frees up Ripley. If she's just mummy, right, and if she's just in this nuclear happy family, then I think her story is basically over. We take away the things she loves, and not only do we do that, but we infect her with this alien parasite, and we give her a ticking time bomb, and we say, there you go, try and find humanity in that. Try and find a reason to go on in that. I actually think I think Ripley, Sigourney Weaver, is probably at her best here as Ripley. She's actually, I think, doing quite a lot. I mean, you can see she's comfortable with the role now. She knows it like the back of her hand anyway. But I think there's a reason why, when you look at other versions of the story, like the William Gibson version and stuff, Ripley's just not there, because you can't really tell Ripley's story now if she's just mummy, like if she's just. So that's why in the William Gibson version, she's just absent, and it's a story about Hicks and Bishop, and I think there's a reason probably why the studio says, hey, listen, we need money, we need a hit, right? We're going to go back to Alien. We're going to say it's coming out in spring '92, and we'll make that happen. And somewhere along the way, they go, shit, I think we probably need Sigourney Weaver, right? So how do you make that work? If Hicks and Newt are there on that prison planet, what's Sigourney Weaver really going to do? She's going to stay with them. She's going to stay away from the prisoners. She's going to try and survive. Here it's like this woman becomes a leader of these men in this kind of biblical story. I don't know. I think I can understand how people are betrayed, and I think that's probably why those low ratings are there, kind of like a punishment, right? But at the same time, I kind of like the fact they take it into this gothic kind of nightmarish realm where it's like, she says herself, you guys have found God at the arse end of space. Who cares about you? You think anybody cares about you? But she does. She says, I will fight this thing. And I just think that makes her such a great hero as a character. So anyway, those are my
I can't really disagree with any of that. Like I do think that those are really valid points. If I were to counter that with anything, it would be, but if we're saying we need a story where Ripley is away from Newt and Hicks, which is fine, why does this story need to pick up while they're in, cryo sleep?
Right.
You know, how many years is it between Aliens and Alien 3? You know, why couldn't this story just pick up that many years later?
Right.
You know, she goes on a mission,
Yeah.
sort of thing. So to me,
Well, I guess maybe then it would be like the Jurassic Park problem of like, why would you ever go back to the dinosaur island with a choice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I did read something which was saying, as far as Ripley's concerned, in real time, Alien to Alien 3 happens within the space of about 3 weeks, and you think that's a bad 3 weeks to go through.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's also I was thinking as I was watching this, like at some point these characters just got to be like, why me?
Right.
Like, holy hell, I just can't get away. Like, what the hell?
Right.
You know, it did feel a little like, okay, we're just this poor character is just being, you know, going through the ringer here with these. You know, these monstrous beasts.
No, yeah, but I want to say that I agree with you, Nick, because I think that what you said was exactly right, because I also like this movie, as you can probably tell. I have mixed feelings about it, but I do, in the end, I just, the way that it's filmed and the way that it's presented and has so many amazing, like, interesting ideas, I've always
I mean, you could use that same argument for Avatar, and Avatar is terrible.
Well, it's 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, so.
So, an interesting thing that I found with Alien 3 was how they, you know, introduced the alien into the compound. It's interesting that they use the dog in the first version.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that creepy scene where the guy's cleaning out that, I don't know, that sort of tunnel, and thinks he's seeing the dog, and he's actually seeing the alien. He gets pulled in, and you know, then he gets splattered in the fan, which is a great bit of gore and horror. In the assembly cut, it's different. They use a cow, and the cow dies, and they're like, we don't know what's happened. Then the alien obviously bursts out of the cow. But what I found really interesting is the cow. There's a scene when after the cow has died, and this is where for me the assembly cut completely falls apart. Totally.
Completely.
Literally for me is there's this scene where the cow's dead. The other guy walks away. Another guy walks to the other side of the room. And he literally picks up the mother flipping face hugger and goes, "Who was this?"
Weird.
And then does nothing with it. And I'm just like, hold on. If you find something like that in your prison, you're going to tell people.
Right.
You're not going to, and therefore I'm kind of like, there's no reason for Ripley to be even doing any sort of investigating, because he has that's what she needs to know right there. You've introduced it, and you've just let it sit on a floor somewhere. Why? So for me, I was kind of like, I was shocked when they did that in the assembly cut, because I was like, gosh, like you've really taken any motivation, in my opinion, out of it. But then the other quirky thing is when the assembly cut doesn't have the dog.
No.
But that scene where the guy's in the tunnel is talking to the dog, even in the assembly cut.
Yeah. It's just like, you just have to think it's like his friend Spike. Yeah.
Right? His Spike? But he's like whistling and stuff. It's like...
Well, there are actually, when you start to count them, there are so many different like continuity, if you want to call it that, errors. I mean, in the theatrical cut, especially, like halfway through the movie, when 85 sets up the idea of this like containment unit for this nuclear waste, and they make a whole thing of it. If something goes in there, it's not coming out, right? Yeah. So you're like, oh, okay, well then that just gets left there, because obviously in the assembly cut, Golic, or rather they chase it in.
Yes.
They lock it in there, but then Golic, because he's obsessed with the dragon, lets it out. And I mean, look, the thing with the dog and the ox, what I like about that as a concept is that it's the first time that it shows that the kind of I don't know what the word is, zoology, morphology of the alien. It can
Yes.
actually, whatever it goes into, it's going to take on host traits. So in this
Yeah.
case, it kind of runs like a dog and moves like a dog. In the assembly cut, there's the problem of it comes out of an ox, but then acts a lot like a dog, right? So
Yeah.
that clearly you can see that some, executive is like, I'm seeing the early rushes here, and the hole coming out of that dog is way too big for what comes out. Can we get a bigger animal?
Ugh.
Right? So
Right.
I think literally that's how they come about. And obviously Fincher, who's doing a million different things at once as a director has thought, well, I've already got the ox in the opening shots when they're picking up the crash landing unit and the rest of it. It would, if one of them's hanging out there, the thing would naturally jump onto one of those. So you can kind of see how that comes about. But yeah, like you say, that's clearly like too many cooks there. That's why we've ended up with two different. I mean, we're not talking about a minor plot point here. We're effectively talking about like the murder weapon, right? In a murder mystery, and like in this one it's an axe, but in the other one it's a frying pan.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now we definitely need axe wounds, right? You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
So yeah, there is mess in whichever version you watch. Basically, it's always going to be messy. It's just
that's just the nature of it.
Watch the assembly cut. It's far better and more interesting than the theatrical one, where it's messy and also less kind of more boring.
Yes. We haven't asked the question yet, but Turloff in the chat asked, why is it called Alien Cubed?
I just keep calling it Alien Cubed.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I do.
I've got a ring to it, man. It's I prefer it to resurrection. Number one, how do you spell resurrection? That's always a ball ache to try.
Yeah. I'm not the only one with that problem.
No kidding. I did, yeah. So I did one scene that I really did like. That was the funeral scene, the very first. I thought that funeral scene with Dylan giving his speech, being offset by the birth of the alien. Now that scene is, to me, I really like that. I thought that was really good bit of gore and horror. It was, we're watching all this stuff. I was watching all this stuff around Halloween time, and I was like, this is like perfect Halloween monster movie stuff. This religious speech as these bodies are being, incinerated, while this just, this abomination is being, exploding out of this cow. That to me was a very, very good scene. I really like.
Well, and also in that scene, the idea that because I think that's kind of the very heart of Alien is the grotesque, but also somehow the beauty.
Love it.
Even in the first movie, we talk about it being perfect and beautiful and all of, like, Ian Holmes' character kind of is in love with it almost in the way that Gollum is. The line that Dylan says literally as it comes out of the creature. For within each seed is the promise of a flower. Within each seed is the promise of a flower, and then it bursts. I mean, whilst Elliot Goldenthal's music is playing, I mean, it's grotesque, but also beautiful and moving. You just think that's the stuff there where if Fincher is 29 years old, right, but all of those things are moving at once, you're like, that scene there is, for me, I think, probably next to the ending, just beautiful and special. And you think, like, wow, that clearly there's a talent there.
Oh,
it wasn't just a mug who turned up to shoot the thing and leave.
Yes,
I love that scene, that whole thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. That one is, you can see that is where all of the talent is shining for this movie. And there are a few moments in this film where you see that, and to me that is I would say that's the crown jewel of that movie, is that scene. The ending, we'll get to that at some point, but that scene to me, I was like, okay, I was just great juxtaposition there. I very, very much in love with that scene. So we can talk about Gollick a little bit. I do think the assembly cut gives him a little bit more to do, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, what are your guys' takes on Gollick in the assembly cut versus the theatrical?
You want to go for it,
Nick, if you please.
Well, I think Gollick in the theatrical cut is basically just a crazy. right? He's
Mm.
you know, I think the most characterization he gets up until you know, being hit with the blood, and then he's kept in the infirmary. The most characterization I think he gets in the theatrical cut is he's chewing too loudly and it annoys his cellmates, right?
Mm.
In the assembly cut, there's a whole scene where those two guys get Dylan and they say, listen, we don't want to do the detail with him, right? He's weird and he smells bad, right? And Dylan basically like, so, you know, and I think whilst there isn't like a huge amount more character, I mean, you know, but it's not a stage play by any means.
No.
Those little details about, you know, guys on a Tuesday morning who basically are going to work, right? It just does let the kind of the world breathe a bit more. I think that's something that all the Alien movies, you know, up until the third one, and probably including the third one, you always get the sense that the camera happens to be pointed at this, but if you looked over there, you would still see the world, right? Like it would still be there. And I think those little details. Also, there's little bits of humor with Golic as well. I mean, there's little bits of humor dotted throughout, like when Andrews gets pulled up into the shaft and there's blood everywhere, and then the guy mopping it, it's like constantly like looking up, you know. Those little details are quite funny, you know. Or the guy who I forget his name now, but he's the word Morse, where Andrews is sucked up. It's silent for a second, and then he just, I don't know if I can swear, he just goes "fuck" really loudly, you know.
Yeah,
great comedic timing for like out of nowhere. As far as Golic goes, I think the assembly cut gives you a character arc there, which is these people don't understand me, right? But I found a beast that does understand me, and I want to go to it, right? He basically is kind of tempted by the devil, essentially.
Yeah.
If we're going to go with this biblical imagery, which clearly the movie wants us to kind of take in, I think it's really interesting that he falls in love with it. And he's willing to betray those around him because he feels like it understands him. And of course, the thing, you know, eats him because that's what it does. So I think I definitely take what you say, that it's not like all of a sudden it's a completely different movie. But I do think it takes it from a kind of mediocre mess into kind of a mess of a very good film, you know, like, or so you end up saying it's a good film, right? Could have been very. It's ended up with good because of the problems, or at least that's kind of how I say it. So.
I kind of feel the same way.
Yeah. Just a couple things in the chat which are fun. Is Biffer says, "Run if you see movies with the word resurrection in it. Alien Resurrection, Halloween Resurrection, The Matrix 4 Resurrections."
Wow, yeah, that's a whole.
You're not wrong, buddy.
Yeah.
And then the Trashed Picture Show says they love Alien 3, the assembly cut, but the assembly cut is good too. Neither is a perfect movie, but damn great. Considering numerous drafts change from monks to cons and daily script changes, still a fantastic flick. I mean, that's the thing. That is
the thing.
We kind of chatted a little bit about that, but it is also worth remembering the problems of Hollywood interference, of producer studio interference. You know, when you are constantly getting rewrites on the day, you know, that you know. That to me is already saying that you're filming a story that isn't done and you shouldn't be filming. Very much reminds me of Quantum of Solace, you know, a film completely destroyed by the fact that there was no script. Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3, great ideas destroyed by the fact they were making up along the way. You know,
totally.
You know, you don't shoot your first draft. Don't do that.
Well, then you're like, we're making Alien 3. We'll work out what Alien 3 is along the way. It's like getting on a plane without knowing where the plane is going. Like, you'll end up somewhere.
Yes, which of course probably it makes sense as to why they thought, well, let's just pick it up right where it left off. The one of the facehuggers is on the ship. Yeah, that makes sense because that's the easiest thing to think of on the spot. You know, it's sort of. That when you think of it in that kind of context, you're like, okay, this is why they went with this sort of simple idea here. Well, I mean, there are complicated ideas in this film that are unfortunately simplified. I think one thing that I know, well, one of the many things that didn't work for me, and I don't know if it worked for you guys, but was the relationship between Clemens and Ripley. That romance had about as much sizzle as, I don't know, a wet fish sucking a toe.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think it's quite that bad because I mean I'm not into feet stuff, but that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Look, I do think you're right. There's not a huge amount of like chemistry necessarily between the two characters themselves. I think the relationship between Clemens, who's played by Charles Dance, who I think is great in everything he does.
Oh, he's a great actor. Yeah, absolutely.
To Americans, it's funny because to Americans, he's sort of the quintessential bad guy in the last sort of 10, 15 years. So maybe it's weird if you go off and you watch him now and he's a good guy, you're kind of like, oh, this doesn't jive. But the relationship between them, I think, is interesting. I think in the assembly cut, he's given some prior information, I think maybe by Andrews, more or less about what Ripley's, like what the EEV says, what Ripley's been through with aliens and the rest of it, so that when she says it's fine, oh, it's just cholera, I can't tell you, he kind of already knows it's bullshit, right?
Yes.
Because in the theatrical cut, he's just very quick to be like, I don't believe you, tell me the truth. And it's kind of like, how are you this clever? How do you know this? I think the relationship between them, look, the aliens, we all love aliens, right? It's a masterpiece, right? It's quotable, it's fun, it's scary. It does everything well. I think the ending is very kind of like middle America, Republican, man meets woman, have baby, he's military, go off, be happy, right? Yeah. Alien 3 is a lot more complicated than that. Alien 3 is basically presenting Ripley as a sexualized, as someone who's got sexual autonomy, who's having basically a one-night stand. She said herself, I've been alone a long time. It's not like she's in love with Clemens. So I think, the chemistry is not popping, but also they don't really present themselves to be in love with each other anyway. It's kind of just a kind of convenient thing at the end of space. But I do think it's interesting to see her for the first time as essentially a woman making, her own choices and sort of seeing her own sexual freedom when it is a movie about her basically being forced to be pregnant later on in the movie. Makes sense.
Yeah. I think I
agree with Nick.
I take it on board to some degree, but I'm fine with the idea and the concept of this is a one night stand. They're not in love. I'm not looking at them thinking they need to be in love. But if this is just sort of a pure carnal thing, that's lost. If it is that they are falling in love, that is also lost. It's just sort of, to me, it felt like this film requires a sex scene. It requires a bed scene. So here you go.
Right.
It didn't feel earned.
And then he dies immediately afterwards. By the way,
that pissed me off. He finally the fact that he dies directly after finally telling her why he's there. Yeah. Just felt so cheap. Yeah. In my opinion. And I'm like, that's he was a kind of an interesting character. He's more interesting when they're not dancing around with this romance thing. Because from their body language and from the way they're talking afterwards, there is a sense of they like each other. Right. The film is trying to say that. Right. But my problem is leading up to them getting into bed. I'm like, I don't see the sparks. I don't see the. He
plays a very reserved. Yeah, he plays like a very reserved man anyway in that.
Yes.
Story, which I don't think necessarily helps. I think that the biggest kind of insight into the look inside him we get is where right at the beginning where he says, these prisoners haven't seen a woman in years, and then he kind of says to camera as an aside, neither have I for that matter. Right. That's like the one little bit of interiority of him you get. Until for quite a while. I mean, I think it's what I would say is interesting about him dying instantly after sleeping with Ripley is it does kind of subvert the kind of horror trope of when a girl puts out, she gets killed, right? Like you see in all of these slasher movies. Right. It's the typical thing where if you lose your virginity, you end up getting killed, right? So I think it's kind of, maybe if we're reaching, we can say, it's interesting that Alien 3 subverts that for once. But I do think it's kind of, if you are going to kill off essentially a main character, because he is, the secondary character in the story. Like you say, I get that the alien is gonna alien, but the way it happens, it's like, so what? It just walked through the front door. There's a guy right there tied up in bed, but you're gonna like open the curtain. I don't know, man. It just I think I get why you want to stun the audience and be like, shit, now we've lost our main ally, right?
Yeah.
But the way it was done is, it's sort of there's a fine line between being shocking and just kind of being like, oh, all right.
Yeah, because then from that point onwards, the film goes from just convenient moment to convenient moment.
Yeah.
Because she runs out after the alien gets all up in her face. That classic moment of
the iconic kind of.
Yeah. Then she runs and finds the guys in the mess hall chatting, and then the alien just conveniently gets the warden. And it's like, why is the alien there? Why did it want to go there?
Yeah. Well, what's sad about that as well is, I mean, they've already doubted her, right? And of course, when Andrews is like, so let me get this right. We've got an 8-foot monster with acid for blood, right? Of course, that guy has to die, right? He's like the mayor in Jaws, right? Like, of course, that guy has to be wrong, right?
Yes.
But we've already seen him doubt Golik's story. When Golik says it was the dragon, and Andrews says Golik just murdered them, right?
Yeah.
That would have been an opportunity there when she runs out and says it's here. Imagine the directions we could have gone off with. We're saying, well, Golik was tied up and you were the only other one, there. Yes. We could have gone into all kinds of the Thing territory where everybody doubts everyone else. I think you're right. We could have breathed with the kind of suspense. Yeah. There's definitely a point where the alien takes like 40 minutes to do anything. And then when it does, it gets really hungry really quickly and just starts he's literally just eating Charles Dance. And he's like, no, actually, I'm going to have the fat guy as well. And it's like, that was, I don't know. So yeah. There is, as far as convenience goes, though, I do think that because this film suffers in comparison to the first two movies, there are a lot of convenient moments, both in Alien and Aliens, which just get total passes, right? Yeah. Because they're so good. The idea that all of a sudden we're in the dropship in Aliens, right? And one of these aliens happens to have hidden in the dropship, waited until the point where it's gone up into space. Now it's come back down, and they're and now there are moments that are convenient in the first two movies. But I think when you are in this kind of muddle, then those conveniences do kind of stand out a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel. No, go on. Oh well, I feel that if we're gonna get talking about the alien, I think that the alien is, oddly enough to me in the story, the biggest disappointment in the movie, just because what it does just lacks a punch compared to the other.
Like as a character almost.
Like not necessarily as a character, just what it does to just kind of screw up all the other plans that keep happening where they try to capture it and stuff like that. I feel like whenever it shows up, it's nice to see it, but I mean, personally speaking, because I love the design, but there's something that's lacking that the first Alien did so well.
It's called consistency.
Yeah. And that's what
sometimes it's like lightning fast when it's running. Other times it's so slow and can't catch anyone. And it's like
right. Like it's outrun by like a middle-aged English guy. He's like a thespian actor who's outrunning them. I do think you have to pick. So for example, in Alien 1, they do present it as just like an organism, right? Yeah. It doesn't need to outsmart anyone because it's so perfect, right? It just exists and it will destroy you. Alien 2 or Aliens, they kind of take it further and they actually show it as a species and how there are there's a hierarchy and the rest of it. And they do get a bit smarter there. They start to solve problems, right? Which I think is interesting. You're like, oh, actually, well, so they're not just drones then. They're not completely stupid.
How could they cut the power, man? They're animals.
They're in the room, man.
Game over.
Game over, man. In Alien, my favorite line in the whole series is when he says we can't use live ammunition, and one of them says, "Oh, great, what are we meant to use? Harsh language."
Yeah, that was good.
The writing, man. Alien 3, I think, kind of tries to have it both ways. It presents it as a very kind of animalistic alien, if that makes sense. And then there are other times where stuff like when they're trying to trap it at the end in the lead works, where it kind of picks its head out and then it says, no, I don't fancy that, and it comes back. Are you intelligent? Are you not intelligent? Are you a dog or are you an ox? Sometimes it even looks massive. Other times it looks quite small, So clearly I know there were 3 different models of the alien, and I don't know if you just Google Alien 3 model, one of them is just like a little Irish lurcher dog in an alien costume,
Oh, I love that one.
Genuinely
Yeah.
just going to have a real dog dressed up, You think it didn't work out, funny enough. But clearly, like you say, if you just boil it down to one word, it's the consistency thing where they're throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing kind of what sticks. And I think you can tell that even just visually, although it does get nominated for best effects at the Academy Awards. Who knew?
Shocking.
Didn't win though.
No, I'm not surprised by that. Speaking of inconsistency, the other thing that sort of bothered me was, I don't mind this idea of Ripley being infected, but when we've had 2 other Alien movies, we have seen how fast this incubation process is. And she just it for some reason with her it is very slow. Maybe the excuse is that's because she's for some reason the host of the Queen, the new Queen, whatever. Still, but
how does she even know that? By the way,
I was gonna say that. How does she know?
She just sees an X-ray and she's like, "That's a queen."
Right.
That's Queen. Look at the crest. Do you see how the vertebrae? No.
And again, it's kind of like when you think about what you were saying earlier, Nick, how this whole process of film 1 to 3 is only over a span of a couple of weeks.
Right.
So when did she? And I think that's probably adding to the problem of this film, is if that is the case, we might have understood the alien more as viewers of the show, of the movie, but as someone who is in the thick of it, she wouldn't have that information. She wouldn't know that, and so the inconsistencies with how the alien is either a dog or not a dog, or fast or not fast, plus Ripley being infected, and just sort of that incubation period just being so I
don't know if you've seen there is a deleted scene from the first movie where I think it's Alice is actually being made into like an egg. So I think Ridley Scott's idea initially was that the alien could make eggs using people and material and stuff. Obviously, James Cameron went off and then basically gives us the idea of an alien queen, which I like that. And like you say, when Ripley sees this big sucker that's laying eggs and realizes, oh God, this is the life cycle. This is how it works. That's a horrific kind of awesome moment, right, where you actually see the thing laying an egg and how it works and the rest of it. I mean, the idea that she, early on gets a kind of a pass because she says, I've just come out of hypersleep, so I'm going to be feeling rough for a couple of weeks. That kind of seems to, the dialogue there seems to try and kind of say, well, I mean, I haven't realized that I've been infected because of course I'm going to be feeling ill, right? Because I've just come out of hypersleep. You can make the argument, why does nobody feel like that in the second one, right? Why does nobody feel like that
in the first one?
In the first one.
Yeah, so it's kind of it is weird. And I think also there's a line in there which sounds nice, right? Where she says, "You've been in my life so long, I feel like I don't know anything else." Well, 3 weeks. So it's a nice line, but it doesn't really that's a dialogue, that's a writer's line. It doesn't actually kind of stand up to scrutiny. Yeah, clearly consistency here. I mean, look, we know how much kind of interference there was going in. I mean, basically, they build stages in Shepperton, right? They build these kind of sets in Shepperton, millions of dollars spent. And this is all based on the previous draft of the screenplay, which is not being used by the time Fincher turns up day one. So you've already got sound stages and sets and the rest of it, which don't even apply anymore. Rewrites are being faxed through every night. There are movie executives with their arms folded, standing off, saying you're taking too long, blah blah blah. Those inconsistencies, you know, in that with a 29-year-old director, right? Who you can imagine half of the crew, the English crew in 1991 being like, who the bleeding hell is it? Who's he? What? He's the director. You can imagine how that would have been for him.
Yes.
And up until that point, he's a special effects cameraman on like Return of the Jedi and Temple of Doom, and he's done 50 music videos. You know, that's you know, admittedly for like Madonna and Michael Jackson and stuff, but you go into that kind of scenario, and it kind of makes sense that I think by the winter he's left. He doesn't even finish directing the film. He just says, "I'm done." You know.
Yeah.
So it's wild that that film kind of came out even half coherent, really, let alone.
I think the disappointment is that, unlike, say, something like Blade Runner, in which, you know, the theatrical cut of Blade Runner is not terrible. This theatrical cut is borderline terrible, in my opinion. But again, unlike Blade Runner, where the final cut, which is very good, the assembly cut doesn't elevate it. And I think I wasn't obviously thinking about it in relation to Blade Runner, but I sort of was hoping that there would be it elevated it a little bit, but it elevated it a smidge, not enough. And one question that I had in my mind when I was watching this, thinking about Alien Resurrection and Prometheus and Covenant and all that kind of stuff, is the formula just tired? And is this film a product of a tired formula?
I think, well, obviously the elephant in the room there is that Alien 3 really could never. I mean, either you just make a very similar third movie and then you suffer by comparison, or you do something bold and you say, actually, this isn't going to be an action film. It's going to be a gothic horror about faith and abortion, and you do something different, and then people are like, well, this is really different. So I think it's kind of doomed from the outset before you even get into the tired formula thing. I do think that if the film had a second act, because it's basically, we're basically watching a movie that's an hour and 40 minutes long, which was meant to be a 3-hour movie, right? So that's essentially the problem we have, right? We're watching highlights instead of a movie. So that's always going to feel off anyway, right? I think you don't really have a second act. That's just not there. If the formula is tired, I think it's probably because it's a bad attempt at the formula. I think what David Fincher tries to do is something different. And I think, especially, I mean, not to patronize him at all, but especially when you're young, to be like, all right, I've seen what, Ridley Scott's done. I've seen what James Cameron's done. I'm going to go my own way. And we know that Fincher really, really loved Alien, which was what kind of makes him decide to do this in the first place. I think it's kind of commendable that at least it tried to go in a different direction thematically. The theme, I think thematically the film is very beautiful and rich. Plot-wise, it does fall down. And I don't, like you say, the assembly cut doesn't necessarily put the fire out. I think it's like, when you take a camera and you have that filter where it kind of like auto-tunes someone's face, and it kind of does that a little bit, but the face is still not great. So but maybe it is. Maybe now in 2022, maybe we definitely are there. In 1991, when they're filming this, I think if they had just made a carbon copy, maybe done the William Gibson thing, it might have been popular. But what I would say is I think it probably would have resonated a lot less. Because even the stuff we've spoken about today about who Ripley is as a person and the decisions she's making in her love life or whatever it might be, I'm not sure a carbon copy would have cared about that. Do you know what I mean?
No, I totally,
it definitely wouldn't.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Just to kind of backtrack slightly, the Trash Picture Show said regarding why the implanted alien didn't come out quickly enough. It says either the Queen takes longer or Clements gave her morphine, which maybe slowed down the growth rate.
That makes sense. Yeah, maybe. I mean, the Queen gestating for longer you would assume it's because it's bigger, right? It takes a lot. Things that are bigger take longer.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I failed science. Don't
But you would also think that something like that would want to go inside of something like a cow.
Yeah, right. It wouldn't just look like a slender woman,
Right.
Think, yeah, perfect breeding ground. Also very convenient, right? That it's a queen, just for the like it couldn't just be a regular alien, could it?
No.
Yeah. That, you know what, thinking about that in terms of what we were saying about sort of production interference, I could imagine that as a note. Someone said, "Oh, just have her call it the Queen because people like that in that last movie."
Right, totally.
Yeah.
I could see that being why they even mentioned that, because there really is no rhyme or reason for it to be a queen.
No, totally. I think as well, the thing with it being a queen is kind of like they know what the ending is leading up to, right? And like you say, you can imagine the executive be like, okay, well, she is kind of saving humanity, right? And there's a lot of like Christ-like imagery and stuff, and that's cool. Can we go further with it? Can we make it? What if it's like a queen alien? Well, that's let's go with. And you're like, why are we gilding the lily? She's literally saving mankind as it is,
Yeah. I sort of I think it kind of stuck out to me when I was watching this. This was it's in both cuts to some degree, but there's this, and this kind of adds to the inconsistency of things. And this is where Alien 3 is complicated, I think, because I agree that yes, thematically they are doing things that are interesting and that are quite fun. But I've seen many a B movie that have had interesting themes, but they're still terrible movies. Same with have read books that have great ideas, but they don't handle it very well. But there's in terms of inconsistency, there's this moment where Dylan, there's after several deaths, and the prisoners are freaking the hell out, and they're looking for someone to lead them. They at one point Dylan turns to Ripley and he's like, you're a military person, you should be leading us. And Ripley's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then like 5 minutes later or less, Ripley starts giving orders, and Dylan's like, why should we listen to you?
Yeah, I know. It's so stupid. Well, and also what he's saying is like, let me tee up the line where you have a cool line, right? Let me tee you up so you can say the cool thing. And she's like, your ass is already on the line, right? You're already putting it up. It's up to you how you want to meet your fate. And it's like, well, like 7 of your friends have already been eaten.
That's also true. Yeah.
Like you understand what the stakes are here. I mean, I think Dylan is a really interesting character because he's kind of like the avatar of the faith in this community, right?
Yes.
And I love the fact that his first proper interaction with Ripley, he says, "Do you have any faith, sister?" And she says, "No." And I think that's kind of what the heart of the movie is. I mean, we'll get to the ending, but right at the end, when Bishop, the real Bishop, turns up, he's basically, this white man from a powerful corporation, is asking him to trust her. He even says, "You'll just have to trust me." And she says no. And she doesn't trust him, and she saves the world. So I think it's kind of like an interesting message. Basically, your faith is wrong. You're alone, right? We can only trust each other. And I think saying a bunch of like pedophiles and murderers and rapists, even they can find humanity in this. It's kind of like an interesting direction to go in, to make these very disagreeable characters. I mean, even the word unpleasant is mentioned like 2 or 3 times. I think at one point, Charles Dance says to Andrews, "I find you unpleasant to be around." This constant repetition that we're in an unpleasant world. It's like, yeah, we get it. I can see it's not nice.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, I think the other thing that thinking about it, like it was quite interesting, is there is this obviously there's the sense that the Wayland Corporation, they're on their way. They're on their way to collect Ripley. Again, I watching this, I kind of thought, what, when they rock up and you got the guy with the glasses, and then suddenly Bishop is the real guy is there. I kept thinking, when they were mentioning Wayland, earlier on, and we would see the ship every once in a while out in space, just kind of slowly making its way. There was a part of me that was just sort of like, why are we not exploring what's going on
Right.
with these people? I'm
Right.
you know, we don't get a lot, and Bishop is the one that gets to stand out, obviously, the most at the end. But I remember thinking, yeah, I would, you could have given us a second act, as you were saying.
Right.
Think about in those terms. You could have done a second act that explores
Right.
what's going on there. What rather than just sort of this. At the same time, I like this sort of eerie, grim isolation feeling that you get, and I assume that's what they were going for, which is why they're not exploring anything else really outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it becomes so repetitive
Mm.
and kind of boring because we're not getting enough character stuff. That it's like when I'm seeing this ship, I'm like, I want to go on that ship. I want to see what's going on over there.
Well, there's an interesting thing they do, which is just tossed out in dialogue, where I don't think many people pick up on this, but when she has this scan, when she does a CAT scan and sees that there is this thing inside her, I think it just gets tossed out where 85 says the company knows about it, or basically the company have seen it too, and now they're on their way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
They monitor everything.
They monitor everything. They know everything. And Bishop says that too. Like they have the computers. They know everything. And you just think like that detail there. You could have done quite a lot with that, with the story. I mean, like you say, whether or not we have to go into Wayland headquarters and see Mr. Wayland and Mr. Yutani, whatever that is.
Right.
I don't know, but this is the third film now. And all the other ones we'll talk about it, where we'll talk about the bioweapons division, right? And how, think of all we could learn from it and the rest of it. And we just kind of take that. It might be nice to kind of be like, but okay, why? Maybe there is an argument to be like, well, actually, we're in the middle of World War IV against some Martians.
Yes.
And we need it, and we're losing, and I don't know, whatever, right? That's bad. But something like that, it might have been interesting to know, okay, on the one hand, the faceless company is interesting, but on the other hand, it's kind of irrelevant to the story because literally that's why they turn up in the last 3 minutes.
Yes,
they're not affecting the story other than bad people on the way.
Yes, yeah, it's a disservice. I think it's sort of a tacked on bit of controversy that needs to happen that essentially is really only there to pivot Ripley into self-sacrifice.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
rather than just she would have been dead anyway, right? Yeah. And he says we can save you, and whether or not he's lying,
yes.
But within 100 seconds,
yeah,
the thing will come out anyway.
Yes. And I think we chat about that ending now because I'm kind of when we get to that bit, I'm actually quite ready for the thing to be over, especially in the assembly cut because it's so long. The assembly cut is interesting because it's mostly different for the first 40-ish minutes.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's more or less the exact same thing. The changes are far fewer until you get to the end. That's where the biggest change is I think at the end there. But I there was something just sort of, like I said, tacked on about that ending with Bishop and them trying to have this empowered, speech, try and get her to come and go away with him and use the alien, and she's, does the self-righteous thing, and both versions in it, she sacrifices herself, and as you mentioned earlier, there is this Christ-like imagery that I just find so cheesy. Every time I see it, it never lands, whether it's Superman or not. I'm just like, stop it. It's so obvious. But what is funny is in the theatrical version, as she to sacrifice herself, she's throwing herself into the incinerator. And again, we're waiting this whole time. We're waiting for this stupid alien to burst out of her stupid chest. And then it does it right when she's throwing herself overboard. I'm like, how you couldn't be any more convenient movie. Like, then she grabs it and she's holding it as she's falling into the fire.
As if it's going to go anywhere at that point.
Right? Like, wherever it jumped, it's jumping into the fire.
Right.
But so I kind of hated that. And then, but in the assembly cut, it's more the Christ-like thing where she just, her arms are stretched out and she just falls in, and there she goes, and that's the end of Ripley. And it's I think I found it underwhelming because at the very end, when she's dead and they're shutting up the prison, and they take the one prison guy who survived, like, he's kind of looking around, he's all like happy and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know who the hell you are, man.
Right. But it's also weird that he's the one who survives as well.
Right?
Like, he doesn't. There's nothing in the story that tells you. I mean, I think that's interesting you say that, because I think one of the kind of high notes that people that I've spoken to about it down the years tend to take away is the ending. I mean, I think it's right and fair that Ripley doesn't come out of a third encounter with this thing, because, like you say, after a certain time, you're taking the piss, right? If it's a perfect organism and you're just like a 40-year-old flight officer, which, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but she just gets promoted up to a lieutenant in this movie out of nowhere. She's like first officer. And then all of a sudden in this, she's like, and then he even says, "What about you, sister? You're an officer." Well, number one, how do you know that? And number two, is she? I don't know.
Lieutenant.
Yeah, she becomes a lieutenant out of nowhere. I think the ending, there is the kind of cheesy Christ-like thing. I mean, even before the ending, there's a bit where she asks Dylan to kill her, and she says, "I can't do what I should do." And she kind of puts her arms up against these prison bars.
Oh, yeah.
So they're hitting that quite hard. What I would say is, I think in this movie, the religious imagery and themes are there throughout. So at least it's kind of always telling you that's kind of, it's heading for sacrifice, right? That's kind of the name of the game here. I think what I like about the ending is that it gives you that element of circularity, where we throw the bodies in of Hicks and Newt into that fire.
Yes.
And we even hear, I think it's Dylan say, "They won't ever know the pain to come." It's almost if he's foreshadowing the events themselves. Yes. I think it's right that she ends up in that fire, and I like that circularity. The music is doing so much heavy lifting there. The music makes it so emotional. The soundtrack is just incredible, which is weird actually, because there are a few points in the movie, such as when we're in the POV and we're going on the walls and stuff like that, and also the rape scene where there's just random like heavy metal music.
Oh my god!
It's just like so out of place. Because actually, the way that scene builds up, I think, is quite effective. Where there's no dialogue. You can kind of feel the foreboding, especially because she's trying to get a clue, basically. So she's trying to kind of solve the case, as it were. But then this gets it. So I kind of like the way that builds up. And then all of a sudden, weird detail about that scene, when Dylan starts beating them with a crowbar, at one point, you look at the crowbar, there's like clearly brain matter.
Yes, there is, yes.
You're like, he just killed a guy. So, but then that guy seems to just have a bandaged head later on. So maybe he's okay. Well, going back to your thing about the ending, I can see why it might kind of leave you cold. I mean, I like the ending, but I think kind of, more for the kind of like circle that it sets up. We end where we start. And even when she bleeds out of her nose, as he's talking about, the promise of the flower to come and all of that, there is the kind of the Christ-like thing. Also, when she actually goes into the flames, there's no like puff. She just kind of disappears.
She disappears.
Like the way it is no good.
Is kind of weird. But I think my favorite thing about it is the fact that you managed to take Bishop, who in Aliens is such like a warm, trustworthy character, and you really subvert him and you make him really slimy and almost like lizard-like in this one. And he's full of these promises, and you've got this kind of like kind of almost like seedy preacher type thing. He's got all these promises of eternal life and the rest of it, and she says no to that, and she does her own thing. I kind of like that. But yeah, what I would say is I think the build up to that, where they trap the alien, I think it's nice that in this movie they don't have to shoot it out into space, because we have that ending like 4 times in these movies. And I thought what they did with the hot lead and then the cold water, which is really beautifully foreshadowed with the bucket halfway through.
Yeah.
You know, when there's the big accident and the fire goes off and then the sprinklers hit and the bucket, which is so hot, twists.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I thought that was really nicely kind of done. Although the way it looks, obviously, because they're using graphics in 1991, is the way it looks. So, what did you guys make of the chase before, just immediately before the ending in the maze?
Phil, you go.
It's one of the things that when someone says Alien 3 to me, that's one of the things that I remember, because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's interesting because it, like I said, I feel like the alien's presence and what it does necessarily just, from what we know about the alien itself, like what it's doing, it doesn't have that much punch to it. That's just kind of how I feel whenever I see that this is supposed to be like the, final act, and it's supposed to be, where, it's them versus the alien. And what I do like about it is I do like, ironically, I do like them kind of yelling at each other and being confused, which is interesting, because they do say that, they mention that a lot in the movie, where it's like, what are they doing? Improvising. And it's so funny.
Right.
And so, like, just side note, there's so many quotes in this movie that I remember, and I haven't seen this movie in like 10 years, but I get those things in my head all the time, like improvising.
Yeah.
And
there are a lot of kind of weird laughs in that scene as well. Like there are a lot of kind of comedic moments, which I like Fincher's dark humor, but stuff where like Morse and the Italian guy run into each other, and he's saying to a multiple murderer, "Don't hold the scissors like that. You'll fucking kill someone," and they're laughing. It's stuff like that where I like it, but you're kind of like, this is like a third act climax scene. I don't know.
Yeah, it didn't feel part of the film to me.
Yeah, it's like maybe this could have been like a midway thing. Maybe when they first try and trap the beast instead of right at the end.
It felt repetitive to me. I felt like, especially watching the assembly cut, where they do basically the same thing, where they trap it in that room, and then this next event is essentially trying to trap it again, and doing very similar things. The same sort of gags that I'm which I think is why I felt bored, and why I was like, is it the formula that's tired, or is maybe you were saying maybe it's just the way the formula is handled here, which is more or less what the problem would be. The two guys who just start laughing, I'm like, stop laughing and get out of there. What the hell are you doing?
Right. Especially when the thing is like literally up the hallway. It's like he's right there, like what were you expecting?
Yeah.
I mean, I think what would have been nice is, or like in the assembly cut, you see they trap the beast, right? It would have been nice for the alien to kind of learn a lesson, right? And be like, you're not going to get me like that again. And for other complications to ensue, and then it ends up in like, you could still have the lead works and the ending you have, but just have some kind of like other barriers where the alien kind of gets the upper hand. Whereas in this, it's like literally just, all right, I'll play your game, but I'm just so much faster than you that I'm still going to. You know what I mean?
That's it. Yeah, there's a lot that, an action scene. This is with any action scene in film anyway, where it's like, you can have all the cool shots and the cool, like, in this case, I'm just going to say sword fighting or chasing as you want. But at some point, it will get repetitive. You have to always do something with there has to be like a story within that action scene that gets things going some more. And I feel like, this one is a little bit too long.
And, the broad beat of saying, okay, the action will serve the story, because the action is getting the beast into the trap, right?
That's also true.
I like this kind of idea of beast in the maze, and you kind of have to offer yourself up as bait, because I think one of the strengths of the movie is kind of rejecting modern technology and just saying, there's the lovely line where she says, well, what about fire? Most humans have enjoyed that privilege since like the Stone Age.
Stone
and
Age.
then 85 says, all right, no need to be sarcastic.
Yeah.
I like where they go with that, where they're like, these guys have like scissors and axes. That's it,
Yeah.
So they have to kind of use themselves as bait. But I just think if, like you say, the first trap is that, then maybe the climax could have inverted that somehow and done something different, as opposed to this time it will work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what that is.
Yeah. One bit I didn't like in the assembly cut though is when what's the other officer that she's hanging out with after Clemens dies? I can't remember his name now. Is it Clive?
The guy who plays 85.
Something like that. Yes. I can't remember his name. Can't remember what is
He's called Aaron in the film.
Aaron. Yes. Okay. What was really funny, what was really interesting about him is I do like that bit where Bishop is talking and he just gets this thing and bashes him in the head. And now I'm pretty sure it's in both cuts, but in the assembly cut, like his head is jacked up.
His ear is like all the way down.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, like that was a scene. It's like, now that's a grotesque moment. That's great.
When I was a kid,
I quite a lot of gore in this film where they don't mess around, man. Like,
no.
I mean, that is one example. I mean, there's one shot where one of the, I don't know if it's Pete Postlethwaite, but his head is by the window and the kind of the alien's like tongue thing.
Yep.
Yes.
Really goes through it and comes out and or like in the autopsy, like Newt's autopsy, there's a moment where they show you just for that second, they show you like the child's chest being open, man. Like the film is not messing around.
No. I in the defense of the film, I will say yes, there are some really intense visuals that are that sometimes it's less is more, and sometimes it's a whole heck of a lot, and it's but it does get you. There are some really good horror film gags in this film, and aside from I think the alien looking a little bit dumpy, because I don't really like. I think the CGI just doesn't hold up. I think.
It's not CG.
Whatever the hell it is, it's terrible.
It's a rod puppet.
Is it?
Yeah. Well, for the wide shots, yeah.
Where you see it running, it's literally just the puppet. Yeah.
Okay.
So like a bunch of guys underneath it, like doing that with sticks and stuff.
Yeah.
So this probably explains why it kind of looks a bit off.
The scene in the
poorly.
The scene in the infirmary. Then, was that puppet?
Do you know what they do CG there? Is if you look at that scene back, when it runs towards her, you'll see she just kind of scoots into the corner. There's nothing there. When you have the close up, there's this medical trolley which has just been CG'd in to basically hide the alien except for its face. Yeah. Right? If you go back and watch it, you're just like, where did that come from? And oddly enough, it leads to arguably the most iconic image of the Alien franchise, which is obviously her looking away from it and the face right there. But if you go back, it's the trolley that's actually just been CG'd in, basically.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
I didn't know that one.
You'll see when you go back. Obviously it's like foreground, so you're looking at the alien. You're not looking at the thing.
Yeah.
But when you go back and you look at it, you think, where's that come from?
Okay, that's gonna be good.
I just remember seeing that scene and when the alien is running around the room in the infirmary in that particular bit, it just is something about that looked superimposed and fake.
Right. Can we talk real quick? Like, Nick, I'm sure you know this as well as I do, but Giger's original Alien 3 design.
Yes, with the lips and stuff.
With the lips.
Yeah.
Oh, love it. That's so great.
He tried to kind of make a sexy alien, and I think at this point in production they were going with the like wooden planet with the monks. So it's going to be like a sexy lady alien that was going to try and tempt, I don't know, the monks at the time. Which those designs they ended up, I think, using in that film Species. The blonde. It was like a sexy blonde lady, and her thing was that she would then turn into an Alien. Probably around that time, I want to say early 90s.
It seems like it, yeah. And
So-
also like what I loved about the design for that Giger made was that he had these like fingers all around the
1995.
dome.
Yeah.
And if only they put that in the movie. In fact, this is a long time ago. I drew this, but when I guess I was watching Alien 3 or the behind the scenes, and I did draw the alien with the lips. There you go. Take a good look at that.
Wow, look at that. And like that there, where like you look at that, you're like, I mean, I'm not gonna get. I mean, call me picky, but like I'm not smooching that.
No, no,
For money.
that's not
It is
sexy.
a
No,
very
no,
sexual
it is like you
creature,
finish the face
very
being
erotic. You're going to have the alien in the
Yeah,
with
no.
the monks and the
Anyway,
bonus HR Giga impression there.
thank
yeah,
you.
no kidding.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose you know the film ends, and the question is, do we ever get a good Alien film afterwards?
Wow, that's a can of worms. Well, I mean, we've spoken off camera about Prometheus before. I think that is a good movie. I'm not sure if it's necessarily a good Alien movie, depending on how you want to slice it. I'm not a fan of Alien Covenant.
No, it's terrible.
It's just dumb.
No.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Don't like it.
it you know, again, like you put an alien on the camera, I'm probably going to go and see it, right? Like,
Right.
And it does look amazing, and the rest of it. But basically, if you compare Resurrection, any of the Predator movies, you know, the later ones, I think maybe there's an argument to say Prometheus is better than Alien 3. Maybe there's an argument there. But other than Prometheus, I think this, by far and away, kind of steps on all of those.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the last good Alien movie, or it feels like this is the last Alien movie. The rest of it is just kind of like attempts at going back into that franchise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just attempts.
Yeah.
Not very well done.
The thing
Well-
is, with the thing for me is with the Alien 3, I sort of view some of these films like from this 80s and into the 90s. And I guess Alien was 79, but more or less same. In the way that I kind of see like Terminator and RoboCop.
Right.
You know, like 1 and 2. That's it.
Perfect. Films.
That's it.
Perfect.
Beyond
Yeah.
that, there is no more. With
Right.
Alien, the franchise, I am willing to accept that Prometheus is a story set within that universe.
Right.
It's not a
Right.
sequel. It's not a prequel.
Mm.
It's just something set in that universe. And I think the film, I'm a big fan of Prometheus. I think that film actually, when it's not forced to lean into the creature, the
Exactly.
alien monster,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah.
You know, I don't mind the pods that aren't eggs but are pods. That stuff doesn't bother me. I think all that stuff it added a bit of intrigue and mystery to everything that I was happy to explore. But I liked, as we were saying earlier, that, you know, maybe Alien 3 needed some sort of different direction, some sort of different focus. Prometheus, I think, does that because it's not about the monster. It's about the search for where did we come from,
Right.
and then that's how they get into this situation. I think that's why I like Prometheus so much more than the others, because it uses the similar formula, but the way in which these characters get into the situation is so different and way more interesting, I think, than what we got with Alien 3. So I'm kind of Aliens and Aliens, and then Prometheus are like the three that I accept. The rest are just sort of there if I ever want to see them, I guess. My headcanon are those three.
You know, I think I think, you know, the problem is expectation management with Prometheus. I think ultimately, you know, it's kind of like the elephant in the room. Like if I don't know, J.K. Rowling wants to write a book and hope that you won't work out it's actually her writing the book, I mean, the idea that people aren't going to find out, right?
Yes.
So that's just going to be a J.K. Rowling book, whatever you want people to know or not. And I think with Prometheus, there's that kind of similarity of, I get the feeling that Ridley Scott said, I want to get into the folklore of Alien without showing aliens. Right?
Yes.
And the studio said, no way.
Yep.
Right?
I think so too.
And I think that's a shame because you're not going to trust that guy, really. You know, like,
Right.
Okay, he's made some bad movies. The guy's like in his 70s. You know, everybody has a bad day. Fine. He made Alien, man. Like, you're not going to trust him to go back and explore, you know, how that got there. So I think when people go to that movie, they're expecting another Alien movie, and they don't get that. What they get is something very different, which is a good movie and really interesting, but not an Alien movie. And I think that's kind of the similar thing with Alien 3, where there's a certain level of kind of punishment for not being what people expected. And that's I just think that's a shame because give the guy a break. He created it, you know?
Yeah. Because then what's the reaction? The reaction is Alien Covenant, which is, here's your stupid Alien movie, and guess what?
Yeah.
It's stupid.
Guess what? Yeah. I
You
did
happy
not
now?
like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys are dumb Alien.
I think, you know, if we were to come back and do like an Alien Covenant chat, some of the kind of criticisms that we've spoken about with Alien 3, I mean, we could hit Alien Covenant so much harder. And it wasn't that kind of production mess that Alien 3 was. And yet Alien 3 kind of still stays within the lines, you know, as a story so much more than Alien. Well, like, literally, there are moments where you're just like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Like, there might be annoying things in Alien 3, but there aren't that many where you're looking at the screen and I'm now physically annoyed.
Yes.
You know?
I agree. I accept Alien 3 as the conclusion of Ripley's story.
Right.
I'm fine to do that. I do not at any point accept Alien Covenant as the sequel to Prometheus. I do not. That is not what happened to the original.
It's just like this is a thing that's tacked on the end of that. I mean, look, I think, you know, my kind of Jerry's final thought about Alien 3 is that I'm willing to grant any kind of criticisms of it because, I mean, on the one hand, some people like vanilla ice cream, some people like chocolate ice cream, right? So that's just kind of the nature of the beast, if you will. But I think, you know, ultimately you get a movie about Ripley's bodily autonomy. You know, she's saying to a group of men, I must make you nervous. I must make you nervous. This is 1991 when this is being made, and essentially she's forced to carry a pregnancy that she doesn't want, and this kind of faceless organization is trying to stop her deciding what she wants to do with her own body. They clearly value the life of this infant over her life. But she gets to choose her own fate, and so basically we're talking about a pro-choice movie, you know, in 1991, which happens to be about an alien. So I think what Fincher does, what he kind of cobbles out of these drafts, these faxes, these kind of money men and executives, I think what he manages to do, despite all the flaws, is actually a really kind of beautiful, interesting thing. If we compare that to, say, like we gave the example of Terminator and Terminator 2 are basically perfect movies. You know, let's talk about Terminator 3 for a second. You know, like, you know what I mean? It's like, there's an example of someone who's just like, all right, I can just tack on another. You know what I mean? I think what Alien 3 has going for it are these themes, and even if it's kind of realized imperfectly, because of, you know, all of the kind of stuff around it, maybe or not, I think it's still, for me at least, I think I'd go so far as to say a worthy ending to Ripley as a character, who has been arguably like one of the finest heroes in certainly sci-fi in the last 30-40 years in a Hollywood movie. So I don't feel like, when I watch her go into the flames, I don't feel that's a bullshit way to lose an incredible character. You know what I mean?
It's no time to die.
right.
Ooh,
like,
that's a good one.
So that's just the end of James Bond. Cool. All right.
Great. You've blown up James Bond.
Yeah.
Well, at least he gets to maybe have a daughter. Maybe, who knows? Ish.
Ah.
No, that's true. That's true. I think for me, like I'm willing to, I'm willing to sort of, you make very good points, Nick.
Thank you, sir.
I think you're right in that the themes are the film's strong points. And there are moments throughout Alien 3 that that let that shine. And does attempt something interesting and different, a la like trying to do something different. But is held back for I think we said this so many times, but most of these complaints are caveated by this is probably studio interference.
Right.
This is
Well,
probably
because one of the questions I wanted to ask
producer.
you guys was, can we kind of put on our thinking caps for a second and picture what an Alien 3, if the studio had just said, "Hey, carte blanche, do what you like." What do you guys think that would have been like?
I have no idea. That's a good question.
I don't know. I can't
tough.
think.
I mean,
would we go back to Vincent Ward? Was it like his original?
Vincent Ward had the kind of wooden planet idea. Yeah.
Rennie
Harlin, who I think had done Die Hard 2 or Nightmare on Elm Street, he was given it, and then he eventually passed when he was told there are going to be soldiers with guns, and he basically said, "I'm not interested in doing that because James Cameron already did that perfectly. So what's the point?" And I think at that point, that was when the studio had taken away the wooden planet idea and had just said, "Let's have it on a prison planet, but there are going to be guns somehow."
I do like that idea. I like this wooden planet idea. I like this monks idea. I would have been more than happy to have seen that developed, because that is so different to the other two films, and that to me is fun. I don't want to see the same thing again repackaged. I don't want Alien Covenant, which is just a remake of Alien and Aliens. I like being somewhere new and different and experiencing these similar horrors and similar monsters, but in new environments. So I would have loved to have seen that, because the religious aspect of Alien 3 is very interesting. It's underdeveloped. And I would have, if your whole film is based around a society and that is their thing, you could have, and again, added that element of, they're celibate, not seeing a woman in a very long time, and then so you have Sigourney Weaver drop into your compound, like that's gonna crack some necks, so I think that would be way more interesting, because then this as Paul McGann's character, calling it the dragon, you could play on themes of this is the devil.
Well, I think that's actually what was good. I think the beast was going to kind of factor as one of their kind of prophecies. I think that was the story that they were going to kind of, instead of her having to be like, "Hey, there's this monster, and I know it sounds, but it's true, blah blah." I think they were going to be like on board and be like, that makes sense because we believe in blah blah.
The devil.
That's the devil. And I've actually seen, I think it was like storyboards, and the crash landing kind of happens in this artificial kind of lake that they have on board this. I mean, it's a planet, but it's basically a spaceship. And then they're dragging her out of the water like in a wooden rowboat and stuff. So even just if you Google like Alien 3 Vincent Ward storyboard,
you
some
should
of the
check
images
that out.
You think, I love Alien 3, but I think it would have been, there's always that thing left of, I would love to have seen what the other Alien 3.2 would have been, or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yes. That's true. Barry in the chat says, very interesting discussion, chaps. Can we have Nick back for more movie chats?
I like this. Whoever this Barry guy is, I think he's a cool guy.
This Barry guy. Who is this Barry guy? Who watched Alien 3 on Betamax?
Did you watch it on Betamax?
That's what he said. That's what he said.
All right, there we go. That's what I was
saying. He was that old.
Here we go. Phil, this is what Phil was working on while we were chatting about old Alien 3.
It's me with the flashlight, and it's you guys. It's all of us.
Getting.
There we go. Just getting scared by an alien.
By the alien. That's just dropping out of every hole in the ceiling.
Can't see anything on the screen. It's got like a big yellow box.
Oh, you can't see it. Oh no.
Well, I
Oh,
see
no.
myself on the bottom left, but I can. Well, I see you guys on the left, but then it's just like a yellow box.
Crazy. Okay, you'll have
That's
to.
crazy.
We'll share the picture with you because it's
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Yeah, I'd love
It's
that.
really cool. But yeah, no, this is a lot of fun. I would love to have you back on, Nick, and we can chat about who knows. I would be more than happy to do a Prometheus stroke Alien Covenant.
Yeah, let's do that.
I do that. I love
double hitter
that
conversation.
stuff.
I'm down for that. Definitely down for that. Well, it'll be nice as well because then I'm not sort of in the position of being a lawyer and trying to defend a really guilty client. Which is basically what it is.
Exactly. But I will say you did a very good job, sort of explaining, defending rather Alien 3. I think you pulled out the bits that are genuinely the good bits of it, and it's I wouldn't call it a total disaster. I would watch it over Alien Covenant any day.
Right.
It's a limp ending to a great franchise, to a great character, but there are admirable things about it, I think.
For anybody
despite all
who's
my
interested in Alien 3, obviously you can see the movie. There's a really, really good documentary called Wreckage and Rage, and it's all about, it's about the making of the movie, but it's about the kind of constant fight, like the war that is this movie. And that documentary there, where David Fincher doesn't appear in it, obviously, because he's done with it, but you really do get the impression of like if your nightmare job, and everybody who talks about it is like, yeah, this was tricky, that was tricky. It's worth watching for anybody who's interested in this, because it's you just get that kind of sense of imagining being there, and how bad it would have been. You end up feeling really sorry for him. But for anybody who's interested, Wreckage and Rage.
Wreckage and Rage. Check it out. Well, I think we can probably wrap this up, and we can discuss coming back with another Aliens discussion, or other topics, or other films out there. But I would like Prometheus and Alien Covenant, a double hitter.
Definitely. And then when we get through that, we can do Terminator 3.
That would be. You know what?
Rise of the Machines.
I haven't seen any of the new ones.
Have you not?
Since Unitas. I think there are 2 more after that, maybe just
there's only one.
Oh, it's just one.
Dark Fate. Dark Fate was the last one, which is like in Mexico. Yes. And Sarah Connor comes back.
Yes, I know bits and pieces about that, but I've not seen that. That might be an interesting thing to discuss. Some Terminator at some point as well.
I will say in it, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, the Terminator ends up serving people Coronas at one point, and they're just having a chat whilst they drink beer.
Oh, that sounds so.
So if that doesn't whet your appetite.
Oh boy. Where can people find you, Nick?
Well, if you Google my name, Nick Obregon, which is Obregon, just in all the usual places. The Inspector Iwata series are available in all good bookshops and other types of bookshops. And my podcast is called Faceless, and that's on Spotify, Audible, all the usual places. People are smart; they'll Google it.
Also, there is a link to your books in the description of this video. So
good man. Good man. Chaps, I've had a lot of fun. Thank you for listening to my.
Good fun having you on. Really good fun.
Let's do a Prometheus.
Yes, I am up for it. Well, I think we're back on Sunday. We have we're last week we were originally meant to have Derek Miller. That's it. Sorry, my mind went complete blank there. Barry in the chat says bring Nick on for Blade Runner. I have an idea for Blade Runner, Barry, but we'll come to that later. Which I can talk to you about, Nick, if you'd be interested.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, did you see they are going to make a series? Apparently,
they are, and I dread it.
Yes, me too.
we'll see what happens, but I'm not excited. But anyway, we're back on Sunday because we're doing a makeup show. We were meant to chat with Derek Miller, crime writer of Norwegian by Night, American by Day. He's coming to chat with us. Kind of an interesting discussion about the state of heroes within storytelling and pop culture at the moment. And what I'm questioning is the death of heroes. Do we actually have them anymore? Do we have people like, Ripley? Do we have figures like that you can aspire, or be motivated to attempt to aspire to be? So we're going to be discussing that on Sunday night. So we'll hopefully see some of you back then.
Yeah, exactly.
Other than that,
totes.
That's it. We're signing out, guys. Have a good night, chat. We'll see you. We'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in.
This is Phil, Last Survivor of the podcast, signing out. There we go.